Hello everybody, on the channel I love talking about forgotten or overlooked cars, but today I'm talking about an almost forgotten manufacturer, one which still exists and whose products you can buy. I'm talking about SsangYong, and in this video I'm asking the slightly awkward but very important question: can you really still buy a bad car brand new? In the 1970s, particularly if buying British, we became very used to the idea of cars being genuinely awful, vehicles that were essentially disposable. However, when the Japanese came along and told us all how to do it properly, things quickly changed. And by the 1990s, consumers expected a car to be reliable, if not particularly inspiring. So then, why is it with this SsangYong I am asking that difficult question of whether a truly bad car really exists? Well, that's because the last time I think I encountered a new car that was genuinely bad, it was a SsangYong. The car in question was an example of the first generation SsangYong Rexton, a small, fairly bland looking 4x4. And it was so bad that even though I never got to drive it, I still considered it one of the worst cars I'd ever encountered. It was about 10 years ago. We'd hired it from a rental firm for a film that we were shooting over in Wales, and there were several memorable moments. The first was when my gaffer tried to climb on top of the car so we could get a slightly better angle. He leant on the bonnet and it flexed so badly we decided we weren't even going to try it. Then, later on, we tried to park the car on a very gentle incline, but it could not hold its own weight on the handbrake, and because it was a manual, it was very, very difficult to get the shot that we needed. Then, later that night, Simon, the gaffer, came to me very apologetic and said that when he was disassembling the light rig we'd installed into the car, when he went to pull out the 12-volt cigarette lighter plug, it brought half of the dash with it, and we had to try and sort of push it all back together, and it was very clear that the whole thing was a rather low-rent, poorly made affair. It was just all-round awful, and that was to say nothing of the fact it looked horrible, didn't sound very good, and was pretty slow too. After that, had anyone come to me and said they were thinking of buying a SsangYong, they would have been given the sternest of warnings. But I do also believe in second chances, and 15 years ago, had you told me you were thinking of buying a Kia, I, and many others, would have also laughed you out the room. But look at them now. I love modern day Kias, they are fantastic, and they have come along so far in the last decade and a half. If I've learned anything about Korean manufacturers, it's that they learn very quickly. So, in that time, how have SsangYong fared? Well, on the face of it, they seem to be doing quite well. The model range is very modest. This is the Korando. I had asked for the slightly smaller Tivoli, but I was told that is now a model getting close to a replacement, so they felt this was a fairer representation of what the brand can currently do. And for that reason, I thought it was a better car to test. This is about 4.5 meters long, placing it in the same category as things like the Kia Sportage, the BMW X1, and the Audi Q3. Prime fodder then for new families, a very important car buying segment. Though it's unlikely to win any design awards compared with some of the other stuff out there on the roads today, I think it's pretty inoffensive. There's no one real element of this that I don't like, save for the slightly odd panel gaps here and there, but for a car in this kind of market, I don't think anyone really cares. Well, they're unlikely to at this price point. You see, SsangYong have done the most sensible thing that they could. Rather than try and take sales from companies like BMW and Audi on a technology and features front, they've instead gone for value for money. So all of these cars are very well equipped given what you'll pay for them. Even the base model ELX comes with a whole host of features, such as LED lights, cruise control, keyless entry, electric windows, DAB radio, air conditioning, a 150,000 mile, 7-year warranty, and that is in a car that costs you £21,500. In fact, even this top-of-the-line ultimate trim car is just under 30,000 quid. In other words, this fully loaded example is cheaper than a no-options entry-level Q3 and is about the same price as the second from bottom Kia Sportage, which will not get you anywhere near as much stuff as this has. These are pretty cheap cars. So what do you get for the extra near £9,000 over the base car? Well, you get front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera. Weirdly, on the automatic version, you get 19-inch alloys. On the manual, you get 18s. Don't ask me why, because I simply do not know. You also have lots of other creature comforts, including this powered tailgate, which is very frustrating to be near when I'm filming, I have to say. Rise, Lord SsangYong. And an interior that is way better than I expected. I could not believe my eyes when I first opened the door of this car. We have real leather seats in here, and they're a light colour. Hallelujah! Thank you, SsangYong, for sending out a car which isn't just black on black on black. The exterior, by the way, is a kind of metallic blue, though very hard to tell at this time of year. The car also has way more tech than I expected. So your higher trim level cars have a large digital infotainment display here, but also a virtual cockpit. It even works pretty well, operated by the steering wheel controls that are all nice and logical. You've also got some really nice wash, wipe and light stalks. The buttons down here feel like a good quality Toyota from a few years ago. The window switches over here are nice. There's plenty of shiny stuff on it to give it that premium effect. They've also paid real attention to practicality, so there are bottle holders everywhere, 2 in the middle, 2 in each door with a fairly generous pocket as well. There's loads of space in here, plenty for passengers in the back, though the boot is a touch on the disappointing side. There's even some nice little features like a sort of infinity mirror style looking light here that they call mood lighting. The overall shape of the cabin is pretty good. This little selector down here for the drive mode reminds me of a Volvo, and overall this is night and day different to the SsangYong I was expecting. You've even got heated and ventilated seats up front, and though I don't tend to use heated seats, I have been very grateful for them recently because, if you haven't noticed already, I am fighting something of a cold. I also love the HVAC setup here. You've got dual zone climate and it all works really well. In fact, I prefer this over many a recent high-end Audi or Porsche. A small gripe I have is the electric windows. They work quick enough, but when they close, they do sound rather utilitarian. That's quite aggressive, isn't it? More worrying, though, are the seat belts, because on more than one occasion, I felt like I've been trapped by it. Goes on, absolutely fine. Get yourself nice and comfortable, then go to get out of the car. Sometimes it'll let go nice and easily. Other times, and why I don't quite know, it will really grab this. Ignoring the electric version for a moment, the entire lineup consists of just a pair of fairly uninspiring power plants. You can have a 1.5 litre turbo 4-cylinder petrol, such as this, which makes 163 horsepower, or a diesel, which makes 136 horsepower. Both share a pretty poor 0 to 62 time of 12 seconds. That gives you an idea of the kind of performance on offer. Though it is down on power, the diesel is up slightly in terms of torque and also towing ability. This can take a 1.5-ton trailer if it's braked, whereas the diesel can take a 2-ton. Like Kia, I believe SsangYong are trying to establish their popularity through the caravan crowd. The petrol is available with either a 6-speed manual or, as here, a 6-speed auto box, and the diesel exclusively the automatic. It is when you start looking at things like powertrain specifications, you realise where SsangYong have saved a little bit of money, and the whole car does start to feel a generation old. So that 6-speed automatic gearbox is a unit made by Aisin, in other words, Toyota. It's a perfectly fine gearbox, but I haven't seen it on anything new for quite some time. Likewise, the economy and emissions figures are actually better for the manual than the auto. When's the last time you saw that? The economy also is disappointing, so officially this will get between 30 and 40 mpg, but in reality, even on a longer motorway journey, I've struggled to get much over 31. And that's not good, particularly when combined with a fairly small fuel tank of just less than 50 litres, you'll find yourself filling up about every 300 miles. I don't think anyone considering a car like this at the price point it's at will be happy with 30 mpg. It's just not good enough. People expect more. The diesel will do better, but equally, a lot of people now don't want to buy a diesel. Still, you pays your money, you takes your choice. SsangYong are not exactly a new player either. They've actually been in business in one form or another since 1954, though it was only in 1986 they became called SsangYong, formerly being Donga Motors, which I kinda prefer. Anyway, have they managed to put to rest the ghosts of old? Let's see. First thing I wanted to test, the bonnet, and I'm afraid it's a fail. Though it isn't anywhere near as hilariously bad as that old Rexton, it's still just not quite good enough. When you're driving along at motorway speeds, this is bellowing in the wind all the time, and it's rather disconcerting. So much so that I've actually stopped twice now just to check the bonnet was shut properly before I remembered that I hadn't actually opened it yet. That's disappointing. As is the boot space. Officially, this has a near class-leading 551 litres of it, but it just doesn't feel that generous. It was a much, much smaller boot than I expected, and it is somewhat irksome. To try and do an airport run with this, which I did the other day, you do have to fold the seats down, which then limits your passenger capacity, and to me, completely eliminates the whole point of having a 4x4. If you actually want space and practicality, go and buy an estate car instead. They're just better. But that's not really SsangYong's fault. That's the fault of, well, just about everybody that's bought something like this over an estate car. Can't moan at them for building what people want to buy. Oh, and the little switch for the boot as well. The other day that just got stuck in, didn't want to pop back out. And I know that's a really, really small thing, but small things like that I do pay attention to, particularly when a company is trying to up its quality. If I found that in just 3 days of having the car, then I'm pretty sure it should have been discovered during the production process. It's just a button after all. It should work. You stay down. Okay, so I have a few minor gripes then, and in a couple of areas the car is a touch out of date, but it's also a massive improvement over the last one that I drove, and considering the price being asked, I think it's excellent value for money. What then is it like to drive? Once again, first impressions are actually surprisingly positive, and there's a few areas where the car being a little bit old school isn't a bad thing. For example, the gearbox down here. You've got an old-fashioned automatic gear lever. You want it in drive, grab the trigger behind it, pull it down, you're in drive. You always know exactly what mode the box is in, unlike many of the modern electronically actuated items which drive me bananas. Around town, at junctions, roundabouts and the like, the car is fairly keen to pull away, and at no point has it left me in the lurch. The steering is fairly pleasant, electric assistance, it's quite keen to turn in, doesn't give you anything really in terms of feel or feedback, but on occasion it can actually be quite an entertaining car to hustle. It has some Nexen mud and snow tyres fitted, which actually are the perfect thing for this time of year. And this is actually the nicest conditions I've had while the car's been on my driveway. The combination of winter tyres and damp roads has also allowed the car to show a little bit of playfulness that I expect, had I driven it in the summer, I would not have found. It can on occasion struggle for traction, which it really shouldn't given the fact it has so little power and a reasonable curb weight, just over 1.5 tonnes, but if it's wet, even in second or third gear, occasionally it will scrabble. Even more surprisingly, on occasion I've thought I felt just a hint of lift-off oversteer. It hasn't stepped out on me, but in a few bends where I've been taking it perhaps a little bit too fast, I felt the rear end just start to move around a touch, which I did not expect, but is actually quite enjoyable. The car does feel considerably more alive than I would have thought. I do believe an all-wheel drive powertrain is available for these, but only with the diesel, and I couldn't even find it on their website. So either it's been discontinued, is not out yet, or is just not available in this market, I couldn't say. I expect that's not an issue to the vast majority of customers, but for a few it will be a deal breaker. Foot flat now, 45, 50, 55, and there's roughly your 60. Now I do have some issues with this car, and I'll start with one of the more annoying ones, this rev counter down here. Now it clearly says that the red line is at 6,500 RPM, but regardless of what mode you have the car in, normal, sport, manual, auto, does not matter, it will change up at 5,000 RPM. Not once have I ever seen that needle go beyond 5. This is not a rev counter, this is a circle of lies. 6.5, my backside. Even worse than that, the other day I took it to some filming, and at a roundabout I put my foot down on the exit, it got to about 4,000 RPM, stopped pulling, gave me a check engine light, and then ran like a bag of spanners. I honestly thought the car was completely broken. It felt like the wheels had been swapped out for square ones. It was horrid, misfiring really badly, and I did not know what was going on. I managed to pull over, turn the car off and on again, and the problem went away. But since then, a spectre has hung over this car for me that, if that's happened in just the few days that I've had it, that is worrying. There is every chance it's just a coincidence. Maybe there was a tiny bit of bad fuel in there or something. But it was running pretty rough for an extended period, about 5 minutes, before I could safely pull the car over. Thanks, smart motorways. It is also generally quite a coarse and gruff engine that only really starts to pick up at about 4,000 RPM, which I think is why I'm so disappointed that the red line seems to be artificially limited. The manual mode for the gearbox is also a bit of wishful thinking on SsangYong's part that is really unnecessary. I was shocked to see that it actually had paddles, and they're quite a funky design because you look at them and go, ah, there they are, and then you realise, well, hang on a minute, they're ages away, they're really inboard of the steering wheel rim. But they've styled them in such a way that if you put your hands where you think the paddles should be, lo and behold, there they are. That I do appreciate, even though it was entirely unnecessary. Likewise, I also appreciate the very bright and clear reversing camera. It is basic, as these things go, but it also does the job very well. I don't need any more information than it gives me. Now, one thing I am noticing with this car, and I'm sure I just did, is the fact that even with lane departure off, I'm pretty sure it's still trying to tell me what to do. The lane departure system itself is also not anywhere near as refined as that of many other manufacturers, even budget ones. It is quite intrusive, it is not very delicate when it tells you what to do, and it is frankly very annoying. One thing I'm really glad SsangYong have done is maintained a fairly square profile for this car, which brings with it several benefits. In theory, it gives you more room in the car, though for the boot that doesn't seem to have worked, but for rear passengers it has. You've got plenty of space back there. I can sit myself behind myself with legroom to spare. It also makes this a fairly easy car to place. Though it isn't massive, certainly not compared to a lot of other stuff on the road, it's also not small. And by having a really good view of that bonnet, you can place the car with relative ease. Sport mode, by the way, gives the steering a little bit of extra weight, which I actually quite like, and if you're in auto mode, it will get the gearbox to run generally one gear lower than it normally would. Having only the 6 ratios to choose from, I think, is actually a very good thing. This box here seems somewhat more confident in its choices than many other an 8, 9 or 10 speed. The brake and throttle pedal are both on the light side. Each is fine, I've got no real issues with them. All of my passengers this week have been generally very happy with the fit, finish and MVH of the car, though I would say the engine is a little coarse and also road noise a touch worse than I would hope. The ride quality also simply isn't good enough. It's just a little bit fidgety at all times. Not unpleasant, not crashy, not harsh, but it is very frantic. It feels as if the suspension in this car is working at twice the frequency of anything else on the same road. Braking is by discs all round, and at no point have they given me any cause for concern. So then, if you're on the hunt for this kind of car, should you consider the SsangYong Korando? Well, that's a tricky one. I was kind of hoping this would be a bit of a redemption piece for SsangYong, and in many ways it has been. I would say they have far exceeded my expectations, but there are still just a few small areas where you notice the fit and finish isn't quite as good as it should and could be. The engine, I think, could be a problem for some, particularly if you do want to drive this car with a lot of people and stuff in it on a regular basis. The most I've had in this car is 2 people and 1 suitcase, and though it's far from dangerously slow, it also was a little bit frustrating on occasion. The fuel economy is far more likely to be a deal breaker. That's just unforgivable. I'm currently averaging 30.8 to the gallon. I've driven cars with double the power of this that have done better. And the fact it has made me genuinely concerned about whether it would fail to proceed is something I must hold against it. As the problem never returned, I am inclined to be a little bit more generous than I otherwise might, but still it bugs me. And I suppose the real issue is that, though I can think of a few reasons you might not want one of these cars, I am struggling to think of any really good ones why you would. Turning circle's okay, by the way. Overall then, I would say that unless you're particularly desperate to get some of these features at the absolute lowest price you can, and you must have a brand new car, the SsangYong is difficult to recommend. I would say most people should simply buy the Kia Sportage. However, that does not mean that SsangYong have failed. In fact, quite the opposite. In most areas, this car really has exceeded expectations. It is far closer to the very high bar set by its Korean rivals than I expected it to be, given where it was a decade ago. The next version of their smaller car, the Tivoli, is due out next year, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing just how that moves the game on, because this is already painfully close to being a car I can genuinely recommend without a caveat. And if nothing else, in a world where even companies like Ford are now chasing higher profit margins rather than simply giving the customer best value for money, it's good to know that there are still companies out there dedicated to giving people decent value for money without making them feel like they've cheaped out. This certainly feels like a much nicer place to be than any Dacia I've seen thus far. So, a big thanks to SsangYong then for lending me this car, and to you for putting up with my unusually nasally voice and occasional sniffles. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, particularly if you've test driven or even bought a SsangYong in the last few years. I'd love to know your real world experience of both the car and the dealer, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you for the next one. Bye bye.